An argument you'll often hear is that The Witcher 3's final expansion, Blood and Wine, saved the best for last. When people say that, they're usually talking about things like the atmosphere, Regis, the music, how hot the Duchess is, and, well, you get it. But where Blood and Wine also really shines is with its choices. This expansion puts the fate of every one of its major characters in your and Geralt's hands. And today, we're gonna look at Blood and Wine's critical time to make a choice moments and try to answer the big question. What would Geralt, a character with thousands of pages of backstory that spell out exactly who he is and how he thinks, actually choose to do if the hand of the player wasn't tipping the scales? The truth is, out of every video I've made in this series, and I owe you guys so much for supporting these, but Blood and Wine was what I was most looking forward to covering, because this expansion takes Geralt's biggest regrets, his darkest moments, and gives him a chance to mend the past via your choices. And nowhere is that more true than with the fates of Dettlaff and Syanna.
If I understand you correctly, you would rather help a monster than kill it.
If possible, yeah. Or at least try.
Now, I like to get to the point with these videos, get to what you clicked for right away, and thankfully Blood and Wine makes getting to the point as easy as turning down Trick. Anyway, I say that because Blood and Wine's main quest, we'll cover the side content directly afterwards, but the main quest saves all of its major choices for the last 2 hours of the expansion. Choices that only come about because Dettlaff decides that it's high time to declare vampiric war on the city of Beauclair. It's the few critical moments during that battle and in the aftermath where Geralt's choices determine what happens to not only Syanna and Dettlaff, but also Regis and even the Duchess. Now, in case you don't remember how things go leading up to that point, Geralt is summoned to Beauclair specifically to kill Dettlaff, as he'd been very theatrically killing noblemen around the city. And something I quite frankly don't think Dettlaff gets enough credit for is his productivity, because when it comes to the art of serial killing, he is absolutely locked in. By the end of the very same day Geralt arrives in Toussaint and then tracks Dettlaff down, well, he's already about done with his planned killing spree.
You've killed 4 innocent people, at least.
I would ask you to convey to the Duchess that I've but one victim left, but you'll not get the chance.
Spoiler alert, Geralt does indeed get the chance. Believe it or not, he doesn't die in the first 2 hours of the expansion, but that mystery final target Dettlaff mentions, as well as the connection between the 4 people he'd already killed, is where Syanna comes into play. The 4 men Dettlaff cut down, Milton de Peyrac-Peyrin, Louis Delacroix, Vladimir Crespi, and Ramon Dulac, had all been close friends who formed a knightly team in the past. A knightly team that had been closely trusted by Anna Henrietta's father, the former Duke of Toussaint.
We often witnessed him turn to them with delicate matters. Later, their paths diverged.
One of the delicate matters they were entrusted with was an escort of Syanna, the Duke's other daughter, and of course, Anna Henrietta's sister. And what they did to Syanna before their knightly team rapidly disbanded is nothing short of, well, trust me, we'll be back to this topic in just a minute.
We shall return forthwith.
So, of those 4 knights Dettlaff killed, we only see one of the deaths on screen in a flashback. Directly after the murder, we also see Dettlaff thrashing around and even cutting his own hand off. Now, as an empath, while analyzing this scene frame by frame, something very subtle I picked up on is that Dettlaff appears to be feeling a little upset here. The question is, if he's just a cold-blooded killer, why would he be so upset? And the reason that's even relevant is because for a very short window of time, Geralt sees Dettlaff as a victim, and if at this point you're thinking, huh? You'd be forgiven, but what needs to be remembered is that before Dettlaff throws his ultimate temper tantrum where he orders the death of an entire city, once that happens, all gloves are off. But before that moment, as Geralt learns more about Dettlaff throughout the main quest, well, he comes out looking less and less like a villain and more like a gullible moron, to put it diplomatically.
Sorry, Dettlaff. You've been had.
And this is where we need to bring Syanna back into the picture and get to the choices. Syanna is of course the puppet master of the first 75% of this expansion, or to be honest, calling her the puppet master or a puppet master is giving her way too much credit. She just lucked into dating the only several hundred-year-old vampire in existence who also happened to be about as gullible as your average Facebook grandma.
What's your point?
My point is that Syanna's master plan really wasn't much of a master plan at all. She just got lucky. Long story, extremely short, Syanna and Dettlaff had briefly been together in the past. He grew scarily obsessive over her, so she slipped away one day, and instead of accepting what happened, Dettlaff just told himself that Syanna must have been kidnapped because she never would have left him, even though Regis himself says that all evidence pointed to a kidnapping being extremely unlikely, to say the least.
Apparently she disappeared one day. Her belongings disappeared with her. Not a scenario one associates with kidnapping.
In my humble opinion, she left on her own. Scared off, perhaps, by a bout of Dettlaff's rage that revealed his other, more monstrous side.
It was only significantly later on, when Syanna started thinking about returning to Beauclair and who she wanted dead there, those knights plus the mystery fifth victim, that she realized she already knew the perfect and predictably delusional tool, so she pretended to be her own kidnapper and sent a ransom letter to Dettlaff, along with a one-by-one list of kills that he needed to carry out if he wanted his Syanna back. Needless to say, he took the bait because it played right into what he already wanted to believe. In fact, he took the bait so hard that even after Geralt and Regis explain exactly what he fell for, he still doesn't get it / is in denial.
What nonsense is this?
Now, as this scene goes on, you can see the symbol monkey in Dettlaff's brain slowly fade away as he starts to understand, and once the gears really start turning for him and Syanna's betrayal finally sets in, Dettlaff makes his big demand before storming off.
You will come to Teshamudna and explain all. If you do not, I will raze Beauclair to the ground. This I promise you. You've 3 days.
It's worth pointing out that before Blood and Wine's most infamous, in my opinion worst moment, Syanna does try to do the right thing. Even knowing that Dettlaff is in a violent rage, she's ready to risk her own life to meet his demands because she knows that if she doesn't, innocents will die, which was never part of her plan.
I shall go to him.
Come again? After what he just...
You don't know Dettlaff like I do. If I don't do as he says, he truly will destroy the city. He's more than capable of it.
Seems you've got some last scraps of honor left.
It's the least I can do.
So if you were wondering what I meant by Blood and Wine's worst moment, well, directly after Dettlaff storms off, the game hits you with a 3-day time skip, so for you, the player, only about a minute or two passes between Dettlaff giving his 3-day ultimatum and the game jumping you straight to the night of the attack, where Dettlaff has set himself and hundreds of other vampires on the city, with innocents being slaughtered left, right, and center.
Vampires! They protect the city! So many lives lost!
For some bizarre reason though, it's only just after that moment, when people start dying all across the city, that Geralt and Regis begin discussing their options for saving everyone. What they were doing the previous 3 days is never explained or even referenced aside from Geralt vaguely saying that they were doing their best, but they must not have been trying very hard to do their best because both of the save Beauclair options that you, the player, have to choose from were on the table from the beginning, from the night Dettlaff gave his Beauclair will be destroyed ultimatum. So why would Geralt and Regis wait until hundreds of innocents started dying to take serious action? The answer, to be blunt, is that they wouldn't. I imagine something must have been cut there, but it is what it is.
Indeed.
Now, if your memories of Blood and Wine are a bit fuzzy and you're trying to remember why Syanna didn't just go see Dettlaff like she said she would, long story short, the Duchess put a stop to it by having Syanna locked up and hidden away against her will. You can definitely criticize the Duchess for that, for putting her sister over her subjects, but it's not really relevant to the choice you have to make here. Geralt and Regis, because they spent their last 3 days playing Gwent or whatever the hell they were doing, are left with 2 options for drawing Dettlaff out to hopefully put a stop to his war in Beauclair, because he has no intentions of stopping until he and his vampires have wiped out every innocent civilian in the city. Option 1, find and free Syanna, which they could have tried to do at any time in the past 3 days. Geralt immediately comes up with a very strong lead of speaking with the captain of the Duchess's honor guard who knows where Syanna is. Guess that wasn't considered before, but either way, I'll let it go now. And option 2 is something Regis tells Geralt about near the very beginning of the expansion, when the two of them are trying to find Dettlaff for the first time.
There is a being who can summon Dettlaff, possesses the authority, even the power, to force him to appear in a given place. But the very act of contacting this being, well, it's akin to walking a slack line extended over a chasm filled with molten lava.
When Geralt brings this option up again on the night of Dettlaff's attack, Regis comes very close to getting on his knees, Horson Jr. style, to beg Geralt to please just find Syanna instead. And to be completely honest here, this is one of those rare Witcher 3 choices where there's really no question as to what Geralt would do. Regis is one of Geralt's dearest friends. In the books, he dies for Geralt, or because Blood and Wine has him survive, he, I guess, gets turned into a puddle for Geralt. Not quite death.
Last I saw you...
I was a bubbling, shapeless smear, having been rather spectacularly melted into a column of a certain castle.
The point is, these two have a lot of history, and if Regis is advising Geralt against something out of fear, genuine terror coming from Regis of all people, then I think Geralt would take his advice here and try to find Syanna instead, which thankfully works out perfectly, as the two of them figure out where Syanna is being held within just a handful of minutes, and when Geralt gets to her and Syanna is told of the situation in Beauclair, she still wants to do the right thing.
But, from what you say, folk are dying who have nothing to do with this. Not part of the plan. Dettlaff was only to kill those who deserved it. No one else.
Syanna, of course, had been imprisoned in the Land of 1,000 Fables, a little self-contained fairy tale world that was created for Anna and Syanna when they were children. And what's very important to mention here is that Geralt has plenty of time to help Syanna find a way out of there.
Time flows differently in the Fable Sphere. We can stay here a week, yet outside mere minutes will have passed.
Being aware that there's no rush is important because how Geralt behaves while freeing Syanna comes with significant consequences, to the point where which ending you get is partially determined by it. There are no major earth-shattering choices, just several moments with optional dialogue and responses, but what they really boil down to is whether or not you think Geralt would be curious enough to listen to Syanna's side of the story, and if you know Geralt at all, you already know the answer to that.
Fair enough. Curiosity, that's all. Sorry.
Not to worry, Geralt. Curiosity is a natural reaction under the circumstances, apart from which I've always valued that trait in you.
If there's one thing that is undeniably driven into Geralt's head over and over and over again throughout the games and books, it's that hearing people out is a necessity. The amount of innocents he'd have unknowingly killed or poor judgment calls he'd have made without his curiosity and willingness to listen, well, it's part of the core of his character. It's why I'm so annoyed that the writing of Netflix Witcher has made people think that Geralt is just a guy who grunts and says constantly.
Do you really wish to have this conversation again? Here and now?
Anyway, Syanna is a character who is very often misunderstood and is almost always wildly misrepresented. Mostly because, in my opinion, her backstory can't be fully appreciated if you don't know Geralt's history with the curse that Syanna is apparently afflicted with. The Curse of the Black Sun.
You've heard of the Curse of the Black Sun, Witcher?
The curse of the Mad Mage Eltibald. I believe he started the whole mess that led to several dozen nobly born women being murdered or imprisoned in towers.
This curse, as Anna Henrietta tells Geralt much earlier in the expansion, is something that Syanna was diagnosed with as a young child.
They said she was touched by the curse of the Black Sun. Geralt, is it true? Can an individual be evil because they were born during the wrong lunar phase?
Could be the case. Could also be because they were treated like lepers from birth. Isolated, prodded, ostracized. Couldn't have had it easy, Syanna.
Now, what the Curse of the Black Sun really was a prophecy turned witch hunt. A witch hunt of children who just so happened to have been born during an eclipse. In the books and comics, Geralt labels this so-called curse the Mania of Mad Eltibald, with Mad Eltibald being a mage who made a prediction claiming that 60 girls born during a specific Black Sun would be destined for evil, that they'd drown rivers in blood. And other mages then took that prediction as a go-ahead to begin hunting girls down to experiment on, then more often than not kill and experiment on some more. They did this to whoever they labeled cursed, even though these mages had little to no idea what symptoms to look for, or if the curse was even real to begin with, but it was justified to the common folk as being done for the greater good. What's more disgusting though, and this applies very strongly to Syanna, is that these mages had serious incentive to target girls who were nobly born. The reason for that is exactly what you're already thinking. In the Witcher world, most mages and sorceresses are power-hungry little
Who are you?
I'm Cynthia, a mage in training. Philippa is my mentor.
My condolences.
Sorry, what I meant to say was that mages and sorceresses in the Witcher world are known to start frothing at the mouth at any opportunity to gain political influence. And what better excuse to place yourself into inner ruling circles and to keep an eye on future heirs to various thrones than to point the finger at young noble girls who were born at the wrong time or near the wrong time, because do the specifics really matter when there's power to be gained? As Geralt puts it in the first book, those mages just wanted to tangle the strings of crowned puppets even more.
Curse of the Black Sun. That's why you were banished, right?
Now, before getting to Syanna's specific case, I have to point out that the Curse of the Black Sun could potentially have a grain or three of truth to it. It's completely possible that there are certain girls who were cursed as prophesized. That's a question that is very deliberately left open-ended in the books with a woman named
Renfrey of Craden.
And? Was she truly monstrous?
She was cruel, that's certain. But what caused it? The curse or what she went through? Asking myself to this day.
Renfrey, for the record, did far worse things than Syanna, and had every intention, though it didn't happen, of killing an entire market square's worth of innocents. And despite all of that, Geralt still felt sympathy for her, did not want to fight Renfrey, and even went as far as to let her attack and try to kill him while he pleaded with her to stop before he ultimately had to defend himself. If you're familiar with Geralt, you might be wondering why he'd give her that much grace. That's definitely not the norm. And the answer, I think, really speaks to his character. Geralt feels a kinship with these girls labeled as cursed. Their stories are a lot like his. Geralt, too, was not given a choice when he was taken to Kaer Morhen as a kid and forced into a profession where for the rest of his life he was labeled a mutant, spit at, and accused of every evil thing you can imagine because of baseless wives' tales and finger-pointing from morons. It's no wonder that when the Curse of the Black Sun comes up in the books and games, Geralt treats it with disgust, disdain, and very often like it's a complete joke.
I've heard nothing to convince me that the girl is cursed. What proof can you offer?
Quite a bit. All the girls born soon after the eclipse were discovered to be inclined towards cruelty, aggressive, prone to attacks of wrath and wildness.
Sounds like quite a few women I know.
Now, with the case of Syanna specifically, I mentioned that it's left open-ended as to whether the curse is real in any capacity, but what isn't open-ended is that countless mistakes were made and horrific evils were carried out on innocents in the name of this curse. And Syanna, in her childhood at least, is a prime example of exactly that. Whereas the case of someone like Renfrey is up in the air, was she cursed or was she mistreated into being a monster, I'd argue that Syanna's case is not up in the air at all, or if it is, it's a millimeter off the ground. This often gets ignored, mostly because you learn this in bits and pieces throughout the expansion, but Syanna was guilty of nothing when her parents threw her to the wolves. You learn on several occasions that before Syanna was labeled cursed, she was just a normal kid who unfortunately wasn't the favorite, so she'd take the blame for everything. When her and Anna Henrietta would have your typical sisterly fights, it wasn't Syanna who'd start them, yet she was the one who'd get blamed.
Anna Henrietta was first to strike her sister. Syanna gave back as good as she'd gotten. His Grace the Duke refused to believe my version of events. He laid all the blame on Syanna and vowed to punish the little one harshly.
There was also your typical sibling back and forth going on, which I would argue is completely irrelevant. There's no reason to hold that sort of thing against either of the adult sisters because they were kids at the time.
I recall her always being rather possessive, throwing jealous fits if I had something she didn't.
Here, that's normal for sisters. Rivalry.
True. I suppose I gave as good as I got. There are times I miss that very much.
Syanna's biggest crime, at least before she was labeled cursed, was that she had bad dreams that were solved completely when she was near her sister at night. But despite that, her parents, who highly favorited Anna Henrietta over her and were looking for a reason to pass over Syanna for the throne because she was the eldest sister, then allowed those mages we talked about previously to come to Beauclair to use those dreams as a convenient excuse to give her that cursed label, to tell her as a little kid that she was a mutant born under the Black Sun, that she was destined for evil.
Wolf's pretty cranky.
Surprised? Think about it. He was cast in the role of the Nemesis without ever asking for it. It's a dog's life, I tell you.
It's a dog's life, Geralt, I'll tell you that much.
You can even find an old note buried out in the open world where certain citizens of Beauclair recognized what was happening, that Anna Henrietta was much favored by her parents, so they were using this Curse of the Black Sun as an excuse to effectively get rid of Syanna. And that's not even to mention, and again, this gets ignored everywhere you look, but it was Anna Henrietta's actions that ultimately got Syanna banished from the palace around the age of 11 or 12. The sisters planned to throw fish at a Nilfgaardian envoy as a prank, but Henrietta took it a step further and lit one of the Nilfgaardians on fire. He wasn't seriously injured or anything, but again, it was Syanna who took the blame.
But when it came time to find the culprit, you said not a word. I took all the blame and all the punishment.
It's true. I did not stand up for you. I was too afraid.
It was after that happened that Syanna was banished, still a little kid at the time, and was sent with those 4 knights we talked about at length to escort her outside the duchy. Along the way, they mocked her, starved her, hit her, amongst other things, before they walked away thinking the cold or something else would finish her off.
They left me there alone, without a copper, in a torn lace dress, right when the frosts were setting in.
Those are the men that Syanna takes revenge on, and the truth is, to put it mildly, Geralt would not be mourning their deaths after hearing Syanna's story. To reference something that everybody knows, think of the Killing Monsters trailer, where Vesemir and Geralt are on their way to White Orchard, and after Geralt gets his payment for a contract, he can't help but to stop and intervene when he sees the Nilfgaardians who gave him the contract mistreating some woman. What do you think he would have done if he'd been on the path and witnessed those knights from Beauclair doing what they did to 11, 12-year-old Syanna?
What are you doing?
Killing monsters.
Vesemir told me about that job you did for those Nilfgaardians in Velen.
What? What are you doing?
Killing monsters.
Good one.
To get back on track though, my point here is that before the confrontation with Dettlaff and before finding out the last step of Syanna's plan, which doesn't come until later, there's no doubt in my mind that Geralt would not be cruel to her while breaking Syanna out, that he'd have some sympathy for her and would want to hear Syanna's side of the story, which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle before the Dettlaff choice, Syanna's ribbon. And if you don't remember, there's a little girl who used to sell flint in the Land of a Thousand Fables, and now sells, other things. But what's most important is that she has Syanna's old ribbon, a ribbon she had as a child that supposedly had the power to protect her from evil.
It clearly didn't work, given how I ended up.
But it means a lot to you.
Now, I 100% think Geralt would get the ribbon back for Syanna, as it takes so little on his part, just a game of Gwent, and story-wise, you're specifically told to speak with this girl, as she might have one of the 3 beans Geralt needs to break Syanna out. The problem, though, is that if you get the ribbon, killing Dettlaff or not is no longer a choice, because it turns out the ribbon does protect Syanna, and she's teleported away when Dettlaff tries to gut her, at which point he just wants to kill Geralt and Regis no matter what you do, because he throws another temper tantrum. I think we can all agree, though, that it would be pretty lame of me to skip the Dettlaff choice entirely, so we'll just cover both scenarios, ribbon and no ribbon, so I'm not robbing you of a central choice of the expansion. And hey, before we get to those final main quest choices, if you've enjoyed this video and this series, I'd definitely appreciate it if you could leave a like, as that's just how YouTube determines what's worthy of recommending to anyone. And if you enjoy highly edited, overly researched, mostly medieval-ish gaming content, that's my niche, I guess, that's really specific, but, you know, Witcher, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Dragon Age, a little cyberpunk here and there, then consider subscribing. I promise I'll never spam you 1 or 2 videos I probably put way more effort into than was necessary each month. So, to jump ahead, if Syanna and Geralt escape but are sadly left ribbonless, then once they and Regis meet with Dettlaff, he instantly kills her, despite Regis claiming that Dettlaff would never do such a thing. This, though, is the only scenario where whether Dettlaff dies or not is an option. As mentioned, if you get the ribbon and Syanna is saved, he immediately goes after Geralt, and Regis is the one who jumps in to stop him. If you choose not to find Syanna at all and instead go for the other ending path, which, as a reminder, is tracking down the Unseen Elder who has the power to summon Dettlaff, then again killing him is mandatory, and it's Regis who again sets the tone for that fight. Once it becomes clear that Dettlaff is as far gone as he is, and that he has no issue continuing to cut down civilians, Regis, after a very pained look where he clearly realizes what needs to be done, then walks over to Geralt and makes it obvious that it's time to fight.
Let us be done with this.
When the choice falls on Geralt's shoulders, though, well, you might have wondered why earlier in this video I didn't spend much time on the backstory we get for Dettlaff, like how he helped Regis regain his health and how he was friends with one of the knights who had mistreated Syanna. The reason, to be completely honest here, is that from the perspective of someone like Geralt, who has to wade through the streets of innocent blood that was shed on Dettlaff's orders, well, the sob story no longer matters once Dettlaff decides he's going to kill an entire city's worth of innocents. Before that moment, I'm at least somewhat on Dettlaff's side, and Geralt to an extent is too. Throughout the main story, Geralt is slowly convinced by Regis that maybe they can talk things out because Dettlaff was being blackmailed. And that's where that clip I played near the start of this video comes from.
Despite what you might have heard, I don't lunge at every monster I see sword in hand. Talking gets the job done for some.
For the record, that was a different line from the same conversation. Once the truth comes out about Syanna, though, and Dettlaff storms off after giving his ultimatum, he has 3 entire days to cool down, to do anything else other than slaughter an entire city, yet he still goes ahead with it, and that is 100% on him. That blood is on his hands. Don't get me wrong, Syanna's manipulation was not right and she should be tried and punished for it, but it was Dettlaff who made the choice to bring thousands of innocents into the picture. Think of all the characters you meet throughout Blood and Wine's side content. Those are the type of people that Dettlaff is having slaughtered, people who have nothing to do with Syanna's manipulation. Involving innocent life, not even to mention the scale of it, is a step too far, which is why one of the first things Geralt does after the attack begins is ask Regis for reassurance. Reassurance that he'll have his back once Dettlaff is confronted. And you know, I have to say, for this specific choice, I really did have to think long and hard as to what example to bring up from Geralt's past that heavily correlates to him choosing to kill Dettlaff. It was kind of hard to narrow it down because, quite frankly, I could have chosen almost any example to support it. Geralt has killed for much less. But after thinking on it for a while, I realized that I don't even have to leave Blood and Wine for the perfect example. In fact, I don't even have to exit the night of Dettlaff's attack for a perfect example. And I'm talking, of course, about Oriana.
Talk. Lovely.
Oriana, if you don't remember, is the vampire Geralt meets while attending that dinner party with the Duchess. If Geralt chooses to seek out the Unseen Elder, he has to visit Oriana first, who, as it turns out, provides the funding for an orphanage. An orphanage that, barring one survivor, was fully wiped out during Dettlaff's attack on the city.
Stomach wall cut open in 3 places. Head, shoulder, and neck wounds. Throat ripped open. Sliced aorta.
During this little side adventure, it's revealed that while Oriana does pay for the care of the children and ensures they're genuinely treated well by the staff, she does have an ulterior motive. While she never kills, or even comes close to killing, she does drink blood from the orphans to fuel her addiction. Pretty disgusting, right? Well, yes, and Geralt thinks so too, as he vows to return and kill her.
I'm in a hurry, and you're hiding behind a child. So you'll live this time. I'm letting you. I'll come back for you one day. You realize that, right?
Then I shall keep an eye out for you.
Geralt makes good on his promise too. We see this in the Night to Remember trailer. Now, Oriana is a vampire who, to Geralt's knowledge, has killed absolutely no one, yet he goes out of his way to return and put her down. Dettlaff, on the other hand, is the reason all those children from the orphanage are currently blurry circles on your screen. And make no mistake, there are countless more blurry circles just like them all around Beauclair who had nothing to do with Syanna's manipulation or Dettlaff's 3-day-long hissy fit. Geralt vows to return and kill Oriana because it's his job to protect innocent human life from monsters. And if there is one thing other than Ciri's well-being that he takes very seriously in the books, it's that. When Dettlaff was just a friend of Regis's who had apparently been manipulated into killing some bad men, okay, at that point things could still be talked out. But when he attacks Beauclair and has no issue slaughtering an entire city over something one woman did, well, at that point, Geralt would be a joke of a Witcher to let him walk away. Blood and Wine is a game expansion with an hour left at this point in the story, so what I'm about to say doesn't happen, but after letting Dettlaff go, if he did, Geralt would be known across the continent as the Witcher who was hired to kill the Beast of Beauclair, and not only failed to stop said beast before it attacked the entire city, but then brought the Duchess's sister directly to the beast, got her killed in the process, and then let the monster who did it walk away. He'd be a continent-wide joke at that point, deservedly so, and there's a reason that if you let Dettlaff go here, this is what Regis has to say.
What have we done?
Let a killer walk. Isn't that what you wanted from the start, though?
Even Regis, who as you learn later will face consequences among his kind for helping kill Dettlaff, knows that his friend has gone too far, but he is willing and ready to face those social consequences because, as Regis shows time and time again, he's one of the most pragmatic and selfless characters in the entire franchise.
No, it's hard. A tender subject, but wanted to thank you for helping me with Dettlaff.
You need not.
Hate to pry, but why?
Did I decide to stand against him? I felt rage had consumed him completely. He'd crossed the line beyond which he could no longer control himself. He'd have remained the beast, irrational, unfit to reason with, incapable of experiencing any of the emotions which, for simplicity's sake, we shall call human. I do not wish such a life upon anyone, and especially not on a friend.
Regis is also aware that if Dettlaff is allowed to walk away consequence-free, that Geralt will likely be put to death by Anna Henrietta, or at the very least be thrown in prison for years because he marched the Duchess's sister to her death, and then let a cold-blooded mass killer he was contracted to take down walk away. Syanna was hidden, safe, and without the ribbon, Geralt is the one who gets her killed. Prison, quite frankly, is pretty understandable in that scenario, and while Geralt could escape, he's done it before, that puts him right back to his Witcher 2 situation of being a wanted man, and there's no clearing his name this time because he'd be guilty as charged. Geralt can also say goodbye to Corvo Bianco considering he didn't fulfill any of the terms of his contract, and let's be realistic here, let's just be completely realistic here. The only reason Geralt isn't stripped of his vineyard and thrown in prison for a long, long time in this specific ending if you let Dettlaff go, is again because this is a game and CDPR weren't going to lock players out of 30 plus hours of side content. Dettlaff is simply responsible for far too much innocent blood being spilled, and when push comes to shove and Geralt has to decide whether to let him leave facing no consequences or to take out a mass murderer, well, you know what, I'll just let Geralt speak for himself here.
Let's just say my boots do a rendezvous with his ass.
So before we cover the major side quest choices, let's quickly wrap up Syanna's story, and the big reveal of the final step in her not-so-master plan. The one factor Geralt somehow hadn't considered, that being Syanna's unwavering commitment to getting her revenge against the one person she felt hurt by most. And like so many others, Syanna believes that revenge is best served cold. On a similar note, by the way, you know what else is best served, or in this case delivered, cold? Well, I'm of course talking about Factor's fresh, never frozen meals, as Factor have been kind enough to sponsor yet another video of mine. I think because you guys keep ordering from them, which in turn allows me to ignore every mobile game sponsorship email I get. Anyway, if you don't know, and this is not a talking point I was sent, but I've personally, out of my own pocket, been ordering from Factor for a full year at this point, because doing so has solved every food problem I've ever had. If you're like me and you work a lot, maybe too much, you might understand the struggle of just not having time to cook every day. And the unfortunate thing is that most convenient foods are either unhealthy, prohibitively expensive, or just boring. But Factor is the rare exception that's none of those things. Their meals are fresh, they're affordable, and they're beyond easy to prepare. Their meals can be heated and ready to eat in just 2 minutes, and your order is fully customizable, with a rotating menu of 30 plus options to choose from each and every week. To get started yourself, head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code NEON50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. And for this month, you'll also get another 20% off your second box. If you're on the fence, just know that you won't be locked in for anything. If you give them a try, you can cancel at literally any time, so I'm just personally recommending give that heavily discounted first box a go, and I promise you won't be disappointed.
So, do I spoon feed you?
Someone who might be a little disappointed though is Geralt. Not in Factor meals, they didn't have those back in 1275, but in Syanna, because as you find out after the confrontation with Dettlaff, her planned fifth victim wasn't another unchivalrous knight, but instead her sister, Anna Henrietta.
This time you will see to our Duchessa. It seems we underestimated Syanna rather grossly.
Geralt only uncovers this if he decides to take Regis up on a lead he'd discovered, the location of a final letter revealing the fifth victim Dettlaff tells Geralt about at the start of the expansion.
I don't kill innocents. Murderers, though, you bet.
I think not. You see, I've something to do still.
More murders?
Just one. Not counting yours.
Now, in my opinion, Geralt choosing to follow Regis's lead is a complete no-brainer, especially if Syanna is alive. And when it comes to earlier choices, just because of the ribbon, I think Syanna most likely would have survived Dettlaff's attempt to turn her inside out, which again means killing him wouldn't have even been a choice, because he'd have been the one to attack Geralt. That said, if you're sitting there wondering why Geralt just forgot about Syanna's fifth victim and never asked her about it during the hour or two they were running around the Land of a Thousand Fables collecting beans, well, the answer, in my opinion, is that it's just a major plot convenience. I love Blood and Wine, I really do, especially the characters, but unlike Hearts of Stone, its main quest just isn't perfect. The whole fifth victim mystery thing is a major part of the first half of the expansion. It's brought up time and time again, yet once Geralt gets to Syanna and they have endless chances to talk about everything from Geralt's hatred of portals, to Yennefer's stuffed unicorn, to how good Syanna looks in her new outfit, to, well, you get it. The point is there was no shortage of opportunities to ask who the fifth victim was going to be. Yet Geralt just ignores it, not because of an in-character reason, but because if it wasn't written that way, the ending of this story would kinda fall apart. The whole getting to know Syanna section of Blood and Wine completely hinges on the fact that from Geralt's perspective, Syanna just wanted revenge on a handful of men who mocked her and beat her with whips until she was unconscious, and, among other things we won't get to, left her in the cold for dead. If you add in the element of Syanna wanting to kill her sister, or if you even renew any attention and get people thinking about that fifth victim mystery again, well then the final act of the story CDPR wrote doesn't work nearly as well, and the shock of her final intended victim holds no weight. And I say shock because Geralt and Regis are shocked, whether you the player saw it coming or not.
Well. I must say, even I did not expect this.
Now, I'd like to double down here, because I don't even think any of the huge stretch at best explanations for why Geralt wouldn't have been curious about the fifth victim are convincing. Like, you could argue he just forgot, but that I don't think should or could convince anyone, even the most easily satisfied type of person. Even if you ignore the player choice moments, Geralt still asks Syanna for specifics on each of the 4 men she killed. There's no way her plan being incomplete would just slip his mind after that. He knows there was supposed to be a 5th victim, and she explains to him that the knightly team she wanted revenge on was made up of 4, so unless there's a side quest I missed where Geralt gets bucked in the head really hard by Roach, then I'm not buying the "he forgot" explanation. You could also say, oh, he wants Syanna's help in calling Dettlaff off the city, so he wouldn't want to pry into uncomfortable topics and risk upsetting her. Again, Geralt dives headfirst into many uncomfortable topics while with Syanna, and as a player, you're even given opportunities to be a complete dick in ways much more visceral than just asking about her plan. So, at least in my opinion, Geralt doesn't ask because the story can't allow that to happen. It would ruin the big reveal, and it would also taint all of the conversations where Syanna pours her heart out to Geralt, telling him what she went through. On a related note, if you've been watching this video with a close eye, wondering why I've had Anna Henrietta blocked out or blurred when talking about the 5th victim, because why bother when you guys have already played the expansion and know who it's meant to be? Well, the reason is because up until the moment they find the letter after fighting Dettlaff, Geralt, who this video is about, has no idea. He's legitimately blindsided by the reveal of Syanna's 5th victim, doesn't even know what to think, meaning Syanna wanting vengeance against Anna Henrietta is not something influencing Geralt's opinion of her before that moment, so it's completely irrelevant until he has to make yet another choice upon finding the letter. Does he go straight to the ceremony where he'll be given his reward for ending the vampiric assault on the city, or does he take Regis's advice and take some time before the ceremony to go speak with Syanna and ask why on earth she'd want to kill her sister?
Think she'll even want to?
Talk to you? Would it harm you in any way to try?
You know what I'm about to say, so the question then becomes, how does Geralt handle his meeting with Syanna? In this scenario, he's already read the diary that told part of her story and got him into the Land of 1,000 Fables, and he's already heard her out and unknowingly saved her life via the ribbon, so what does he say now, knowing Syanna intended to kill not just the 4 knights that did her so wrong, but also her little sister, who, as she told him multiple times, she once had a very close relationship with?
Did you like Anna Henrietta?
You jest, I adored her. My darling little sis. So adorable. So sweet. Yet when they banished me from the palace, she didn't so much as peek out of the window.
She might not have known. Maybe just couldn't.
And could she also not grant me amnesty when she was crowned? Please.
If you don't remember, by the way, this meeting is the final step in determining your ending, or the ending for the sisters, I should say, and I'm gonna go through both of the important dialogue choices here. Upon walking into the meeting, Geralt's first question to Syanna is, even if it's a bit rhetorical, why she'd want the Duchess dead.
Why do you want to kill her?
For such an accomplished investigator to ask about the obvious? Come now, Geralt. Why do you think?
Your options are to first blame it on the curse of the Black Sun, which, I mean, come on, Syanna's response to that idiot answer is completely justified.
I see I misjudged you. You understand nothing.
Second, you can blame it entirely on envy, which, knowing why Syanna killed those knights and how hurt she was to have been labeled a villain from birth, really doesn't make sense at all to choose that answer, and Geralt is no idiot, so finally, Geralt can answer correctly. Syanna is right, or was right, to chide Geralt for even asking what she wants revenge on her sister for, because walking into that meeting, he already knows the answer. Syanna is hurt that Anna Henrietta, her only advocate growing up, cast her aside when she was labeled cursed, and from Syanna's perspective, never did anything as an adult to try and find her or make things right.
Come now, Geralt. Why do you think?
Because she turned her back on you, then banished all memory of you.
Bravo, Geralt. Yet another riddle solved, and your sick curiosity sated.
The only other important dialogue choice here is Geralt mentioning to Syanna that maybe she could take a second, because there clearly is goodness in her, to just talk to and forgive her sister. And this interaction leads to one of my all-time favorite Geralt lines.
Time eats away at memories, distorts them. Sometimes we only remember the good, sometimes only the bad.
You know, I was messing around with every other variant of this conversation, from showing up only to tell Syanna that you actually don't care and just walking away, which obviously is stupid, why even meet with her then, to just blaming everything on the curse of the Black Sun. And I ultimately ended up feeling like the way this conversation would go, if you're trying to be true to the character of Geralt, would result in the ending where Syanna ultimately forgives her sister, because she just talks to her, and Geralt, was somewhat kind to her, because that's all it takes. I think a huge telling moment for Syanna's character is back in the Land of a Thousand Fables, when Geralt gets the ribbon for her. After he does that, Syanna is suspicious and is in complete disbelief, because she's clearly never had someone do something kind for her without an ulterior motive.
All right. Tell me.
What?
What you want in return. You're not doing this out of the kindness of your heart.
Don't want anything in return.
Thank you.
As much as I do think Blood and Wine's main quest has some problems and that it's mostly the characters that shine over the broader story being told, making this video has really made me appreciate the Sisters Live ending, where Syanna forgives Anna Henrietta and then goes right back to prison to await her trial, as she should. The reason I've grown to love it, though, is more for Geralt's sake, because this ending is such a full circle moment for him, and I think that's what CDPR were going for. With that short story I talked about at length earlier with the other Black Sun girl Renfri, well, that's one of the only situations from far into Geralt's past that still haunts and follows him everywhere he goes, even at the time of the games. Geralt was put into an impossible situation, but with the information he had at that time, he did everything in his power to do the right thing, to protect innocent lives and also not have to kill Renfri, who was labeled a freak from childhood just like him. His best efforts didn't work though, as sometimes they don't. People died, Renfri died, and what thanks did Geralt get for making the best of a truly impossible situation? He was ran out of town, pelted with rocks, and labeled a butcher, a label that he'll likely never escape as long as he lives. Syanna's situation, though, isn't impossible. Unlike Renfri, Syanna gives every indication that with just a little push in the right direction, she can forgive, she can be that good person that clearly is in there every single time she lets her guard down, every time she stops projecting the I don't care version of herself she created when the world labeled her a monster and cast her aside. I have just grown to love this specific ending, not only in the way that it's built up to with Geralt's choices, but as yet another cornerstone of Blood and Wine just being the perfect cap to Geralt's story, something he can be proud of while spending his days with Yennefer, or Triss, at Corvo Bianco. We've talked enough about Syanna though, so I think it's time we get to the two major interesting side quest choices, or almost time, because before we do, I have something to confess. I lied to each and every one of you. For that, I am deeply sorry, my heart is currently pounding.
Like a liar's.
But the lie was told for a good reason. I said at the start of this video that Blood and Wine has no major choices until Dettlaff attacks the city. That's not exactly true. There is a big one very early on, when Blood and Wine forces Geralt through a major, rapid character arc, where he goes from being very interested and passionate about spoons to boycotting them.
Spoon's incredible. The craftsmanship. Spoon. Still searching for the right spoon. This wooden spoon. Another spoon. Spoon. We can't use spoons. We need to eat without spoons.
Now, if you didn't pick up on it yet, first of all, seek help, but I'm talking about the Spoon Quest, where Geralt uncovers the story of a once beautiful young woman named Marlene who had been cursed into a hideous monster by none other than Gaunter O'Dim. Looking into this curse is very loosely part of the main quest, with the only connection being that Regis needs either Marlene's salivary glands or a bit of her signature stew to use as an ingredient for a potion he's brewing. Geralt, though, after learning her story, has to decide whether he just kills this poor woman who'd been cursed long ago, or if he tries to lift her curse by eating at her table without using a spoon. And, well, can you see where I'm going with this? For one, sticking this choice in the middle of the Syanna Dettlaff discussion would have completely derailed the first half of this video. It has nothing to do with anything else. And two, there's no debate here. I don't think anyone would disagree that Geralt would not kill Marlene. He would lift her curse. That's what he does best.
Look at his eyes. You see he's the sensitive kind.
Whatever you may see in his eyes,
Few know more about lifting curses.
That's not even to mention that in Geralt's past, he'd already suffered a humiliating defeat to a fork, so he's not gonna let a spoon get the best of him too. 2 is a good word for us to jump from though, because that's exactly how many significant side quest choices Blood and Wine has. More specifically, there's the one that determines the fate of both Vivienne and Guillaume, and there's also the choice as to whether you kill the last remaining Silver Basilisk. Blood and Wine's other side quests are for the most part really lighthearted without moral dilemmas, so there's just not much else that wouldn't be complete filler, unless you really want to see me debate whether or not Geralt would let an elderly man hang onto a pair of,
Here, you must take the testes.
It's kind of a shame, really, because in the video about the base game, tons of really interesting Witcher contract choices ended up getting skipped entirely. There's a story-related reason for that, plus that video was already 3 hours long even without Witcher contracts, but for example, the Kniving choice, and the All-God decision, and the Skellige Leshen quest, and Firestarter, and at least 15 more, yet Blood and Wine only has 2 side quest choices that anyone ever talks about. We've been covering those skipped base game Witcher contract choices over on the Patreon just as little bonuses, but I do selfishly wish Blood and Wine had just a couple more moral dilemmas, even though Geralt has definitely earned some easygoing Witcher work in his semi-retirement. Anyway, if you don't remember, the side quest with Guillaume and Vivienne is one that branches directly off from the main story, right at the beginning, actually. On the same day Geralt arrives in Toussaint, he runs into Guillaume twice, and in both cases, he's getting his ass beat. First by a giant named Goliath, and then by a Shaelmar. After Geralt saves him a second time, Guillaume mentions in passing that he needs to speak with Geralt about something.
Geralt, we must talk. Vivienne.
So, to cut straight to the chase, if you want to know what would really happen to Guillaume if Geralt was in charge, well, behold.
Lost blood. Lots of it. Wrung dry, you might say.
And to clarify, not wrung dry by Vivienne, that's a different ending, but instead by Dettlaff's vampires. How Guillaume can die, by the way, if you're wondering, is if you wait too long to meet with him. His and Vivienne's quest, the Warble of a Smitten Knight, is the one and only quest in all of Blood and Wine that just fails if you don't complete it before Dettlaff attacks the city, so if Geralt were making the decisions, Guillaume would just die. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to cop out and skip the actual quest, but realistically, Guillaume dying is what would happen, because in the same cutscene where he tells Geralt to come see him because he's having a problem with the girl he's obsessed with, Geralt gets whisked away by Anna Henrietta, and in that same conversation, they realize that Dettlaff is about to kill again, so they take off to try and stop him.
Faster, Geralt! Right like the wind!
That frantic quest, where they try and fail to find Dettlaff before he strikes again, leads directly to Geralt's first confrontation with him, and then to Geralt reuniting with Regis and their non-stop mission to find him before he kills his 5th victim. At no point in the main story before the cutoff point for Guillaume's quest is there a time for Geralt to stop and say, you know what, I'm under the biggest contract of my life to protect Beauclair from a serial-killing vampire, but let me take a day off to go speak to some guy I don't even know about his relationship troubles. And I put it that way because Guillaume doesn't even tell Geralt that there's Witcher's work or a curse involved when he asks for his help. He just says that he's having trouble with Vivienne, who he's trying to impress. Not exactly a high-priority situation compared to Dettlaff killing people. That said, I still want to talk about Vivienne's curse, so just ignore the last minute or so of this video.
Such is my wish.
So, upon speaking to Guillaume, he admits to Geralt that, as part of his obsession with Vivienne, one night he crouched in a bush outside the home of her seamstress while she had an appointment there. After she was done, he pretended to bump into her as an excuse to talk. And after a bit of very one-sided conversation, her input wasn't exactly what he was looking for.
Then suddenly, mid-speech, from her mouth there flew a most hideous shriek. I stopped stone cold in my tracks while she turned red, then promptly ran off. I did not give chase that time.
Good guy Guillaume, he didn't give chase that time, but long story very, very short, her screeches led to him suspecting that she might be cursed, which he confides in Geralt, who tracks Vivienne's movement that same night, and discovers that she truly is cursed into looking like a bird, an oriole specifically. It turns out that while in public, she's able to mask her curse with a combination of ointments and a magical pool that transforms her back into human form, if only temporarily.
Its effects are brief, but I can always be sure of them.
The origin of Vivienne's curse, though, is left extremely vague. Her parents had angered a forest being near that same pool, and when they didn't cough up to its demands for payment, this thing cursed their as-yet unborn daughter, twisting the words of Vivienne's mother, who loved orioles. That said, despite the details being mostly left to your imagination, there is a really interesting theory that Wispis is behind Vivienne's curse. Wispis, of course, being one of the crones from Crookback Bog, one of the two killed by Ciri. Now this is firmly a theory, but the long and short of it is that Wispis did used to live in Toussaint. You can even find the cave in which she once lived, and it just so happens that her cave isn't particularly far from Vivienne's pool. The being that cast her curse was also described to Vivienne by her parents as being a nymph of some kind, a woman-like creature, which could definitely apply to Wispis in her human form. That's not even to mention that in the basement underneath the crone tapestry, you'll find 4 unique voodoo dolls connected to various curses the crones had cast in the past. One of the dolls represents Anna, the Bloody Baron's wife, another represents a peasant from Downwarren, but one of the other crone dolls is covered in bird feathers, raising the question as to whether that doll is meant to symbolize Vivienne. Now, I suppose the origin of her curse doesn't really matter when it comes to the choice Geralt has to make about lifting it, so let's get back on track. Geralt presents to Vivienne 2 options for lifting her curse. The first, transferring it to someone else who would take on a weaker version of it, and this option Vivienne shoots down immediately.
I do not even wish to hear of it.
The other option is tried and true, an ancient ritual that would lift the bird curse entirely by moving it back into an Oriole egg. The catch is that while the curse would die out entirely in this case, Vivienne would run the risk, though not guaranteed, of having only 7 years to live afterwards, the average lifespan of an Oriole.
Yet you wish to give me 7 years of life. Real life, free life. This is no dilemma. I agree. Wholeheartedly.
Now, it's important to point out that before Vivienne told him her story, Geralt promised to her that he wouldn't share her secret with anyone unless it was absolutely necessary, like if she was putting others in danger or something, because at that point he didn't know exactly what she was. It's also important to point out that they're planning to meet again the very next day once Vivienne has had some time to think. The reason that's relevant is because once Geralt returns to his tent at the tourney grounds, because in case you don't remember, Vivienne's questline is wrapped up in the tourney quest, Guillaume is waiting for him and demands information.
What ails her?
She asked me not to talk about it.
And this is where you have to make a choice. Do you immediately break your promise to Vivienne, or do you let Vivienne think on her options for the night? To be honest, I don't see a world where Geralt instantly folds to Guillaume here. He just gave his word that he wouldn't tell anyone else unless absolutely necessary. And ultimately, it's Vivienne's life, Vivienne's choice, and the truth of the matter is, Guillaume barely even knows Vivienne. He's had 1 conversation with her, and without any player choice involved, that's something Geralt calls him out on earlier in the quest.
You say that only because you do not know Vivienne as I do. A life with her would be sweetness itself.
Actually, you don't know her all that well either.
I just don't think Geralt would break Vivienne's trust, especially not immediately when they're planning to discuss things the next day. If you're making choices in this quest from your own perspective, or especially if you're making choices knowing what the endings are, well, then there are many arguments to be made, for sure, because this is one of the rare Witcher 3 quests that makes you feel good about your choices no matter what you do. But we're covering what Geralt would do in the moment, and I don't think he'd break a word just given when it's Vivienne's decision to make, not his. Both curse-lifting options have serious risks and downsides. Vivienne doesn't want to drag anyone else into her mess, and I think Geralt would really respect that.
Vivienne gave me the details of her situation, but she did so in confidence. Promised I wouldn't tell anyone.
What this means, of course, is that there are no other choices to be had. Geralt meets with Vivienne the very next day, and they lift her curse as planned.
Geralt, look! Look! Oh, gods! I shall be able to attend balls. I shall travel to Oxenford, to Novigrad even. Thank you, Witcher.
Vivienne then immediately departs Toussaint to live her life to the full. You can find her in Novigrad, where she's just infectiously happy, and then in Skellige, where she's exactly the same. And of course, if you wait 7 years in-game, you'll find that she does indeed pass away after the average lifespan of an Oriole. In my opinion, while it doesn't matter for Geralt's choice, this is a perfect ending. I love it. But before we shift to the final choice for this video, I do want to say one last thing. Guillaume is a character that really deserves a completely separate discussion from whether Geralt would break Vivienne's trust or not. I could easily make 2 separate videos about Guillaume. One where I try to convince you that he's the worst guy ever, and another where I attempt to make the point that he truly does care for Vivienne. In the first video, I could talk about the countless moments where Guillaume makes it obvious that he's primarily obsessed with Vivienne's looks, like how he starts pouting when Geralt implies that Vivienne's beauty might come from her curse, And I could also cover how nasty Guillaume becomes when he doesn't get what he wants. He throws an absolute hissy fit if Geralt doesn't break Vivienne's trust for him. And if you lift the curse the Oriel way and Vivienne goes off to live her life, he's not happy for her. He's angry she's not with him. And in that ending, he becomes a drunken loser on the streets of Beauclair.
Guillaume, what are you doing here?
Leave me be. Without my Vivienne, life has no meaning. You are the last to whom I wish to speak.
However, if I wanted to defend Guillaume, I could also give you a completely separate list of points, maybe just not quite as long of a list. Like how if you let Guillaume die by skipping his quest, you'll find Vivienne crying at his grave. I don't think that means she was in love with him, after all she takes off without ever speaking to Guillaume again if you lift her curse the other way, but it definitely speaks to how Vivienne was mostly keeping him and all suitors at arm's length, not because she wasn't interested, but because she felt it could never work because of her curse, which I'm sure led to a lot of regrets. I could also talk about how if you do break Vivienne's trust and tell Guillaume, that he legitimately does step up to the plate, and Geralt, after the curse is transformed, admits that he didn't even think that option had a chance of working because, at least according to folktales, it required true love, which he definitely didn't see as being part of the equation.
Descriptions all seemed dramatic, embellished, all stipulated a condition that seemed improbable.
What condition was this?
A real bond between those involved. True love.
That's honestly a huge point in favor of Geralt not breaking Vivienne's trust, because he didn't think the other option would work anyway. But that true love moment is an interesting one that I know confuses a lot of people. Many interpret it as meaning that Guillaume's feelings during the tournament were purely genuine, but I really don't think that's the case. At that point earlier in the quest, Guillaume had only ever had one true conversation with her, and again, he really does tell on himself several times that he's obsessed with Vivienne's looks more than anything else, and doesn't actually know her. However, the reason I think transferring the curse does end up working is not from genuine love on his end, but from Vivienne's. I think in the moment, Vivienne genuinely falls for Guillaume when he's willing to take on her curse and doesn't turn back after seeing her bird form. That's the only interpretation of this ending that, for me, really makes the whole quest and all possible endings fit together. I think when Vivienne is crying at Guillaume's grave if he dies, she's feeling regret for missed opportunities. I think when she takes off and lives her life, never bothering to speak to Guillaume again in the egg ending, that she didn't actually have any serious feelings for him at that point because they'd only ever spoken the one time and he comes off like another, as she puts it, lusty knight, which really is what Guillaume is during and before the tourney. However, I think in the transfer curse ending, she falls for him in the moment as he's willing to take on such a great burden for her, and that's why the transfer works. Then, as they get to know each other post-quest, it turns out that they're actually a decent fit, and Guillaume's feelings become less superficial, which is why things turn out okay in that ending too.
I've grown some feathers. Well, down, to be precise.
Whereabouts?
Why mention it? It's such a minor problem.
Personally, I like it.
So our final quest to be covered is Mutual of Beauclair's Wild Kingdom, a pretty simple Witcher contract in which Geralt picks up a notice requesting his help with an escort of merchants through dangerous territory threatened by a beast known as the Great White Terror. Unfortunately though, when Geralt shows up to the merchant camp for the job, the man who posted the notice is in no shape to be escorted anywhere, other than maybe the morgue.
Man, bled to death.
While investigating to try and track the beast that did it, which Geralt quickly determines to be a basilisk, a man rides in claiming that the basilisk in question is his responsibility.
I look after it personally.
Look after it? It's not exactly a pet. Beasts murdering folk who come through here.
This man explains that when his basilisk kills people who come onto his land, he compensates them generously.
From my own coffers.
Your coffers. Got a store of sons and husbands in there to compensate for those shredded by your beast?
Now, this man, Count Borhis de Salvaresis, of course does not want Geralt to kill the basilisk, Yocast he calls it. He claims it's the last of a subspecies, which is debatable. There's a history book you can find out in the open world that talks about the Count's family and how the so-called silver basilisk they made their family crest is widely accepted to not even be a subspecies, but as we'll get to, I don't think for Geralt whether it might be the last of its kind or not really matters anyway. The Count, though, during the 5 minutes or so of interacting with Geralt while they talk and Geralt then moves around the merchant camp to continue his investigation, throws everything he possibly can at Geralt to try and change his mind. And I say change his mind because without any player choice involved, Geralt is dead set on killing the basilisk during this phase of the quest, and he makes that clear time and time again.
Where's the basilisk nesting? Any idea?
Of course I've an idea. But you don't really expect me to tell you. Those are not toy swords. I know your intentions.
Find it myself, then.
While moving around the camp, Geralt is actively strategizing about using Igni to take the Basilisk down, and how he'll brew a potion to help with the fight. And during all of this, the Count grows more and more desperate. Their initial conversation when he first rides up is already full of half-truths and some lies. Those lies just get more egregious as this quest goes on. Now, that's not to say nothing the Count says is true or that he has no good points, but he does lie. For example, maybe the best example, when Geralt finishes his investigation at the camp and says out loud that it's time to track the beast down, it's at that point where the Count hits full desperation mode and makes this bold claim.
Why track her at all? Your caste is protected. Her death would forever destabilize the ecosystem. Who knows what would happen? I see unforeseeable consequences down the line.
This, of course, is an outright lie, and doesn't even make any sense. Basilisks are an invasive species from another world. That's why Witchers exist, to kill violent monsters that don't belong, that serve no ecological purpose. And to really drive that point home, there's even a document that can be found out in the open world where a kid is telling his mother that the people of Beauclair are horrified at the sheer amount of livestock being wasted to keep Yocast full, aka satisfied and less tempted by humans. Now, the Count also tries to defend himself by pointing to the notices you can find around the area, warning of the Basilisk's presence.
You post those warnings?
Indeed, to prevent anyone from coming to any harm.
Well, a lot of good they did. Got a freshly mangled corpse right here.
I just have to say, these notices are often used in defense of the Count, when really, in my opinion, they should be used for the opposite purpose. His notices outright tell people that if they are hurt, killed, or if their property is damaged by the Basilisk in any way, that they'll be fully monetarily compensated in return. I'm sure you see the problem, but that is just incentivizing bad people to take advantage of his idiot notices for personal gain, which, by the way, as you find out, is actively happening. Once Geralt leaves the camp and finds the second victim of the Basilisk that day, a note on his body reveals exactly what you'd expect. That a few specific members of a nearby guild are well aware that the Count pays handsomely for all damages, so they see no reason to stop sending their transports and directing merchants along the same road they always had. In fact, there's even evidence they specifically want their caravans attacked, as he pays out so well. Now, obviously, the Count isn't malicious in his intent there, but he is unbelievably stupid in his approach, because people taking advantage of his generous compensation is the most obvious outcome of all time. He's giving people a major incentive to tempt Yocast. The merchants are horrible people too, but that doesn't absolve him of putting people at risk, and that's not even mentioning that Yocast territory is a huge area along a major road not particularly far from Beauclair. Of course people are going to end up coming through, notices or not, whether it be children, or people who aren't going to take a huge detour on account of a sign, or just don't see it, or people who can't read, because many can't in the Witcher world. There's a moment in the books where Geralt isn't even sure if an alderman of a town is literate. Anyway, though, it's just after finding the second victim that Geralt has to decide whether to do what he came to do, kill the Basilisk because he was dead set on it when leaving the camp, or whether he should spare it. After walking up a hill, he comes across a few Crinfrid Reavers, and it's not particularly relevant, but he knows some other Reavers from the books and Witcher 2. They have a very short conversation. It turns out they've also been hired to kill the beast because of its attacks, and they offer to team up with Geralt and give him part of their reward.
Could take on the brute together. Talk is the venom's something horrifying.
Then the Count shows up again and offers to pay them all off, at which point it's time to make a choice.
What say you to that, master? Far as I know, beasts culled the human race by 5 already.
Now, let's be real, you probably know what I'm going to say here.
Beast has to die. We work together, we'll make quick work of it.
I do totally understand as a player sparing Yocast, especially if you make more current parallels. You know, idiot at zoo jumps into tiger enclosure and gets mauled, not the tiger's fault, right? But this isn't current day, this isn't even our world, and we're talking about Geralt here. Generally speaking, Geralt isn't an overly simple character, but when it comes to monsters that can't be spoken to or reasoned with, if they've killed humans, he's very consistent. They die.
It's a dangerous predator that kills humans. Enough said.
It wouldn't matter to him that Yocast is potentially the last of a monstrous subspecies, and I think a great example of player thought process versus Geralt thought process comes from the ending where you do spare Yocast. Online, you'll often see people mention a specific ending detail as a good thing, because you discover after the ending, if you return to the area, that if you spared her, Yocast finds another non-silver basilisk to mate and create new basilisks with. Now, in comment sections, you'll see people react to that as a good thing, like, "Aw, a new hybrid basilisk can be created," whereas Geralt's in-game reaction is this.
Yocast could lay new eggs, perhaps produce an entirely new crossbreed.
Sure hope not.
It's also worth pointing out that Geralt, of course, wouldn't have information from any of the quest endings when making his choice. He only knows what he knows in the moment, and to be completely honest, even if he did have post-ending information, I don't think a single barricade that's constructed and the knowledge that the basilisk is going to start breeding again would change his mind. Anyway, that is all for today. If you've enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really does help out the channel immensely. And if you're interested in supporting the channel further and getting some bonus content, consider checking out the Patreon, where, like I said, we've been covering Witcher contracts from the base game that didn't make the original video. My next 2 uploads for the channel are maybe the most exciting in the history of said channel, and unfortunately, I can't say what they will be, but both will be up within the next month. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and see ya!